All right, so we are returning with some LRA action. Pretty cool stuff. And to start here, we have Molotov versus Joan. Molotov we saw in the PCS qualifier as well as the actual championship tournament as well. So good to see Molotov back in action in a tournament or a league, I should say, like LRA. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into Joan versus Molotov.
But no time to talk about that as it looks like the players are getting into the game already.
All right, let's go ahead and head on over to the first match. And again, or not again, we haven't even mentioned this yet. Team Kraken released versus Team Gears here is what we're going to see up first. And for the time being, it looks like we have Molotov versus Joan here in game. And we'll see how this goes. Although, Boulevard, are you wearing a Hearthstone shirt?
It's a hoodie, so no, I'm
All
not
right, a
wearing
hoodie. Are you wearing a Hearthstone hoodie? Don't get me on a technicality to get out of this.
I am. It is one of the most comfortable hoodies that I own.
Oh,
it's this
God.
really nice light blue color, and it was like $30 on Blizzard's website for like some summer sale like a year and a half, 2 years ago or something. But I love this hoodie.
I don't know how I feel.
And it's
about
October,
this.
so it's hoodie weather. You know, I gotta get in right on the day one. I'm in the hoodie. But let's talk about this match here. We've got what looks to be Noxus Nab up against Indoor Spiders.
Yeah, so very curious to see how this goes. Already, you mentioned that Bastion change. We're actually not even seeing any Bastion decks. No Targon yet, so I am curious if we do see that as we go a little bit further in the tournament here. But it looks like Molotov got a decision to make here. Could do the hired gun, but looks like Make It Rain is the obvious choice with that Bark Beast on the field. I want to take a second to pull up the deck list here. I don't know if you have them already, Boulevard. I'm interested to see what he's got.
I did, because it took me a little while to find Joan because they are not listed as Joan under the player sheet. But we have the very standard Indoor Spider list with the 2 Wraith Callers, sort of the one that we've been seeing throughout the release of Call of the Mountain. And then on the side of the pirate or the Noxus Nab, there are so many Noxus Bilgewater decks, it's going to take me a while to remember all of the different names here on the side of Molotov. No Jack the Winner has just completely cut that card from the list. Petty Officer still seeing play as a 3 of, which is kind of how I thought we were going to see this card play out, where, it originally came out as a 3-1. Everybody was like, okay, that's really bad. We're not going to play that. Gets buffed up. We start to play with it more, and we realize, maybe this actually wasn't so bad as a 3-1, to the point where now we are still having it see play, even though it did see a reversion back to that, whereas if it had stayed as a 3-1 the whole time, I don't know if we ever really would have picked up on it.
Yeah, and this Endure deck on the side of Joan is labeled Hyper Endure, so we'll see how quickly they are able to go ahead and get off this combo, the Atrocity Dehu Endure combo. Looks like 3 Doom Beast. So pretty typical with the 3 Stalking Shadows, which has been such an amazing addition to this deck. 3 Unspeakable Horror and 2 Wraith Callers to kind of add some of that Wraith goodness in there.
Wraith goodness, definitely not a word I thought I was going to be hearing today.
I still wish full-on Wraith decks were a thing, and they're just not quite there. They're not that great.
Oh, this is going to be big.
Ooh.
The red card on the Twisted Fate going to annihilate this Blighted Caretaker turn, and this is something that I really feel for with Indoor Spider decks, where if you start off, this is one of the matchups where I feel like whoever has the attack token going first, it really impacts the way that the match plays out. And I feel like that's something that you and I specifically don't talk about a whole lot. But if Joan had the attack token on 3, there's not a whole lot that Molotov would have been able to done to stop that, considering that the Make It Rain had already come out of their hand. Instead, you do have the attack on 4, and that means you are walking right into that Twisted Fates red card.
Yeah, and now going into turn 5 here, Molotov has the tempo, has the extra mana, and seems to have the control of this game. This might be a pretty good spot to go ahead and play the Gangplank. Could also go for the open attack, which would proc this Black Market Merchant here, maybe save the the warning shot for something like a Riptide a little later on. But are we just going towards a turn 8 Farron again? Or are we just going to try to do as much damage as possible and try to pop all those Decimates coming up soon here?
Yeah, definitely want to push as much damage as possible against this Endure Spider deck because without Noxian, well, there's one Noxian Guillotine in the list, but as we've seen a lot with Twisted Fate Swain, it really feels like you need 2 copies of that card to actually handle an Endure. So if you only see 1 copy in a Noxus deck like this, Endure is really not what that was coming in for because they'll get to attack with the Endure, you guillotine it, they Atrocity, you need a follow-up spell to kill that. So I think Molotov is kind of accepting if we get to these big Endure turns, I don't have much in the way of actually killing you. I need to just put my foot on the gas and get you into range of 1, maybe 2 decimates.
Yeah, we'll see if that's what we are headed towards here for Molotov. Molotov, so if I remember correctly, Boulevard, Molotov was in the PCS tournament, correct?
That sounds correct.
I think they went pretty far, too. I'm trying to remember. I know they made the final tournament, I believe, but I think they got out maybe after the second or third round or so. So Molotov, a great player. Awesome to see them in the league here. We're going to see if he's able to take home a win for his team today. But looks like we're probably going with this warning shot now. Looks like we want to get this black market merchant off. Going to do the extra damage with the keg. And, I mean, this looks really good for Molotov, right? I mean, you already have Joan down to 9. You have a Riptide in hand, which will not only clear the board of whatever Joan's able to get to stick here on this turn and the next turn or two. But it's also possibly going to do some more face damage. And being at 9, Joan's got 0 heal. We have the Captain Farron with the decimates. This is going to be a pretty good setup here for Molotov.
So that ephemeral Bark Beast coming down on the attack turn, I don't know if that's going to be used to sort of attack all the way to the left and trigger that first Bark Beast. Never mind. It's just going to be food for a Blighted Caretaker. What I was going to bring up is that Joan doesn't have the attack token on 7, the turn that the Endure is going to come down. And that's, just once again, this is really not the turns that the Endure Spider player wants to be on. I feel like they are a little bit more disadvantaged when they're on the evens, especially because they have so many 1-drops against decks that don't typically, there's not a lot of 1-drops in a lot of decks in the format right now. Lee Sin decks have Gift Giver, but get into that a little bit later if we do see some Lee Sin action. But instead, it's going to be a big return swing from Joan. Says, go ahead. If you want to sacrifice your Gangplank, your Wraithcaller, whatever, go ahead, feel free. I will just push as much damage as possible. And I haven't really been keeping track of this Endure, but anytime I see 2 Blighted Caretakers come down, it's going to be at least bigger than a 10-10.
Yeah, it's going to be a big boy once it finally hits the field. I guess the question is, you did mention They Who Endure costing 7. It will hit the field prior to something like Farron or Riptide Rex coming down. So I really feel like that's going to be the turn for Joan to take this away. I mean, if they have a They Who Endure as well as an Atrocity for turn 7 and then into turn 8 using the Atrocity, it's possible Joan could go ahead and still take this away. But once turn 8 comes, I think that's game over. Molotov is going to have this in the bag. So we'll see what happens here going into turn 7. Another Riptide, not exactly the best draw at this point. Too many 8s. Too many 8s, man. You don't like to see it.
No, and I think that Molotov really understands that he's going for the Captain Farron lethal here. Use the Death Sand not only to preserve life total to stay hopefully outside of that Endure range and is just outside of the Endure range, but was actually playing more towards the Captain Farron finish than the Riptide Rex. But you're not out of the woods yet. You don't have a way to kill that Endure. And it looks like we're actually just going to even sacrifice the Gangplank to push a little bit more damage. I don't love this play, but I don't really I don't really feel any type of way about this play just because you're not putting your opponent onto any less decimates that you need to use to kill them. The Gangplank isn't as effective a blocker for the Endure as this hired gun is anyway. So, oh no, I'm sorry.
It's down to 1 decimate.
You actually are putting them down to 1 decimate. I don't think that impacts anything, though. Either Joan has the Atrocity or they don't.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So as much as you don't have to play another Atrocity, I don't think having to use 2 turns of priority is really going to matter versus Joan. Like you said, either they have it or not. So we'll see if that's the case. I imagine, we're going to see the Captain Farron come down. And let's see it, Joan. You have the Atrocity. Now would basically be the time to play it because on 3 mana, I don't think Molotov has any answer to the Atrocity coming down here.
Absolutely not.
There's
the Guillotine. There's the Guillotine. Yeah, so it is kind of rough to proactively use it. So this 1 Guillotine, I don't think Joan really has an option, though, right? Like, you throw it down now. It really comes down to, does Joan have Atrocity? Does Molotov have the Guillotine? We know that Guillotine isn't in Molotov's hand. We don't know about this atrocity, but I mean, if you don't throw it down now, all that you're doing is passing until next turn and then using it in response to a Decimate. You're giving Molotov one more turn to potentially top deck that Guillotine. And as silly as it might feel, as weird as it might look, if you have the atrocity, you got to throw it down now.
You can't, you're never going to get, wow, awesome read going through what seems like the same exact thought process that you just explained there. And yeah, I mean, because your opponent's never going to go below 3 mana, right? Like, at no other turn are you ever going to get a shot to play it. So you know what? One less draw. Let's go for it. And it worked out for Joan. Going to go ahead and take it with that atrocity there. Wow, feels bad. It's so exactly what we were mentioning with the turn 7 into 8. Joan had that one turn in turn 7 into 8 to go ahead and try to win the game, and did it.
Yeah, working out phenomenally there. And it is a little bit weird to me that in that Liquid tournament that we saw last weekend, there wasn't a whole lot of Endure Spiders, which is strange to me because I feel like it historically has a pretty good matchup against Bilgewater Noxus because, as we mentioned, Guillotine is really the only answer for that Endure, and you can constantly find yourselves in situations where you can kill your opponent even through the Guillotine unless they have 2 of them. And I mean, Noxus Bilgewater was easily the most represented regional combination in that tournament. So I like players kind of going back to the Endure, picking up on that a little bit, understanding that the Bilgewater Noxus, even though it was nerfed a little bit, is still going to be just as prevalent as it was in this tournament.
So one thing that I imagine will come out in this matchup specifically, because there's going to be 6 total in play, I want to see if this Petty Officer change does something, because if you remember a really long time ago, so Petty Officer, for those who don't know, got reduced health from 2 to 1 as kind of a nerf, because obviously we're seeing it in damn near every deck that plays Bilgewater, but it was actually previously a 3-1 and was buffed to 3-2 a long ways back when Bilgewater kind of first hit, because nobody was playing it, weirdly enough. I know that sounds really weird, but so I'm curious to see if people maybe just missed the boat when it was first a 3-1, thinking it was bad, and as a 3-1 now, it's still good, just getting you either a keg or a 1-cost follower.
It is a little bit weird to me that it's still seeing as much play, especially if Noxus Bilgewater continues to be as popular as it is, because every Noxus Bilgewater deck is playing Make It Rain.
Yeah.
Pirate Aggro, Noxus Nab, TF Swain, all of them. And Petty Officer dying to Make It Rain is a massive, massive deal.
Yeah, especially if you pull with the Petty Officer another 1-cost follower that has 1 health, then you're just asking for a rough time. And we do see a Petty Officer here, so we'll see if that comes out. I imagine that exact interaction is going to happen, Boulevard. Like, we're going to see that happen pretty soon.
See, this is a turn where I feel like if it were a 3-2 Petty Officer, I wouldn't mind developing it pre-combat, but because we're on turn 4, now if a Twisted Fate comes down with a red card, you just clear my entire board, depending on what the Petty Officer pulls, aside from, my Dreadway deckhand, and that doesn't look great for me. And now we're going to see a Make It Rain followed by the response Make It Rain. Molotov, you have the other Make It Rain.
No, don't do it.
And here we go. A melody of Make It Rains, or a medley of Make It Rains, rather, gonna come down here. Joan, do you have Make It Rain number 2 of your own? Make it a quartet. Show me how these puppies sing.
I don't like this. I don't know. Like, you literally have the Petty Officer in hand for the exact thing that you want to get your opponent on. Like, you want to be able to play the Make It Rain on their Petty Officer when they drop it. I don't think you blow 2 of your Make It Rains on the side of Molotov just to really push through, kill that House Spider. Totally not worth it. So I like the Molotov.
I thought you were the send a message player, and it looks like Molotov is actually going to steal the message, rip the poster off Joan's front door, and says, "Give me that Make It Rain."
Wow, nice. I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. The mental sometimes by just saying hell no, I'm gonna do what I want is definitely an advantage. But this red card, I want to talk about advantage. This is gonna get some advantage right here, killing both 2-1s. Another 1 damage AOE that again Petty Officer is vulnerable to. So I know I keep mentioning it. I'm just really curious. Like I got to agree with you, Boulevard. I'm very surprised to see both players still opting to put 3 of each in their deck. So you got to ask yourself, I mean, today's Thursday. The patch, downloaded yesterday, technically. So was everybody pretty much just like, we don't really know what's going on right now because the patch just happened, so we're just going to keep the decks pretty much as is?
I mean, it's possible. I also don't think that Petty Officer is bad by any means. I think that if you do continue to see a high prevalence of Bilgewater Noxus, there are only so many tournaments in a row where you can play a Petty Officer and have it immediately die to Make It Rain or Twisted Fate before you're like, okay, this either has to come out of my deck or I have to start banning the Bilgewater Noxus decks. But I definitely expected to see it this high in prevalence at the start of the patch. You don't really just want to knee-jerk take every card out of your deck just because it was nerfed. But I don't know how long it is for this world.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know as well. Just to continue on kind of the deck choices here, I've seen a ton of Lee Sin and Zed on ladder. Obviously, that's kind of like the deck right
This
now.
was this was an impossible play last patch. This would have been a 3-2
Oh yeah,
and a 1-2.
Here we go. So this is
But
exactly
now,
what we're talking about.
The fact that you pulled out the Inspiring Mentor, the other card that got flipped around to have only 1 HP, these are the kind of scenarios. How many times can that happen to you before you're like, okay, Petty Officer, you're out of here?
Probably
Especially
one.
with Twisted Fate being so prevalent in these Bilgewater decks, and I feel like Pirate aggro, we're not seeing nearly as much as Noxus Nab, and that just means that you are much more likely to see a Twisted Fate deck out of your opponent when you see this regional composition.
Oh yeah, 100%. And we were just talking about it for a few turns there. It happened, and I think honestly it only happens once or twice before you're like, I'm taking this out. So because that definitely feels bad to lose the entire field there, but we do see the Gangplank come down from Molotov. And we'll see what the next play is. What I was saying before about Lee Sin and Zed is to not see it in both players' lineups. I don't know if that makes me happy or sad, just because it shows maybe Bastion isn't as busted as people think. But I'm very curious to see if anybody else decides to change up their lineups a little bit. But for the time being, this Swain thing still a thing, and we see the Swain leveled up, coming down. We'll see if we're able to utilize that on the side of Joan here.
So this is, and this could be an incorrect analysis, but follow me here, see if you have any of the same feelings as me. This is a Latin America tournament.
Yep.
And I feel like we don't actually see Latin America players really gravitate towards control. It definitely feels like much more of an aggro region. We definitely see a lot of the Bilgewater adaptations coming out of Latin America. And I'm curious if Lee Sin just doesn't jive with sort of the player base. I mean, Europe has always gravitated more towards control. America's always been a little more mid-range, and at least that's how it's felt to me across multiple card games, where Europe really likes their late game, America's kind of likes their mid game, and then Latin America's really aggressive. So maybe it is just they don't like Twisted Fate decks all that.
I feel like you've always been like that, huh? I feel like you've always been of the mind of every country or every region kind of plays the game a little bit differently. I'd be interested to see if we could prove that somehow, because I tend to agree with you sometimes. Like those two comments, Europeans being more control-y. And I do feel like the Pirate aggro deck kind of originated almost in like Latin America or Brazil, because we did see it a lot in some of those Brazilian and Latin American tournaments. So generally I agree with you, but I wish there was a way to kind of prove that play style somehow.
I think we'd have to talk to Biolog about it.
Oh yeah, that'd be a long discussion.
Oh, for sure. Because I know that generally when I make meta predictions, I tend to lean more towards late game, and Europe is almost always like 100% in line with what I said.
Are we just saying that because
America
of Fresh
just throws
Lobster?
it all out the window and plays Kangaroo Court?
Are we just saying that because of Fresh Lobster? Because he just like plays.
I mean, Lobster helps, but so Molotov has game here if he wants to. Can just throw out the Death Sand and the Make It Rain, and there's nothing that Joan's going to be able to do about that. That is going to hit face and be lethal. Thought about going for the Riptide Rex, and I mean, there's no world where the Riptide doesn't kill Joan either. No matter how these shots line up, you're still going to get the 2 overloaded onto the face. So it's just kind of a pick your poison here. And it looks like he said, Make It Rain sort of decided the early game. We'll have it decide the late game as well. And that is going to be lethal for Molotov.
Yeah, Molotov going to take it home there. So going to tie this series up 1-1. So good to see after that decently quick loss there to the They Who Endure deck. And we'll see what the third matchup is going to be here. It's going to be the TF Swain deck once again. And it'll be up against either Fiora Shen or good old War Mother's Call with the 3 Trundle, 3 Tryndamere, 3 Hearthguard, 3 Warding Stones. That's it. Those are the followers. Those are the champions. That's all she wrote.
Yeah, not going for any Rekindlers, no Ladros, no She Who Wanders, or sort of the big 3 that we'll see as slight adaptations out of these players. But no, and even War Mothers, I feel, plays more like an aggro deck than a control deck right now, where you just get down, 1 or 2 massive overwhelm units, throw an atrocity at your opponent, and you could see the game. I mean, it'll take a couple of turns, but we could see the game end in less than 10 minutes.
I always I look at the deck and I always think to myself, like, man, I really feel like you're not getting a lot of use out of War Mother's Call with only 9 targets in the deck, right? But you're always guaranteed to hit War Mothers, obviously. And when it comes down to it, like you said, these are some big boys in Trundle and Tryndamere, so they're very hard to remove once they do hit the field. And generally speaking, the only way you're going to get a board wipe on your side is if your opponent is also playing War Mothers, because they'll have a Ruination or something like that, or like some random spooky Karma deck or something. So I actually do like this adaptation. Also avoids hitting, any of the smaller followers that you might play if you're playing anything outside of wording. So I would have liked to see Ladros though. I really do love Ladros in this deck.
I'm a big fan of the Ladros, but getting into this actual matchup, I was looking through the deck lists a little bit earlier, and we were talking about the lack of Lee Sin that we were seeing. There was a lot of Shen Fiora in this tournament, SJW. This is really where these players have wanted to commit their Ionia, and we knew that Shen Fiora was strong, but Lee Sin did seem to be hedging its bets a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and now with the Bastion buff, I would have assumed it would have overtaken it this format, maybe not on the first weekend, but at some point. And so to see absolutely no Lee Sin decks and so many Shen Fiora decks, do you think that is an unwillingness to experiment day one of the meta, or is it we think Shen Fiora is just better than Lee Sin?
I do think it's the former. I think it's the first thing you said. I think that it's too early to really experiment with something like that in a tournament like this. But I don't know. I really feel like that many players. Are you saying there's no Lee Sin in the entire?
From the matches that we're going to be seeing today, I don't know if I got a chance to look at all the deck lists, but I went through a vast majority of them and didn't see a single Lee Sin. Or I saw one Trundle Lee Sin.
I can't imagine what. Okay, I can't imagine nobody decided to experiment, but I don't know. I mean, I think it is still up in the air because that deck is very much all in on its strategy, and I don't think people have had enough time to play with it to really see like how it performs in certain matchups versus other matchups, etc. So maybe that was a concern. I think universally people agree that it's a decent deck, but is it necessarily better than Fiora Shen? Well, Fiora Shen has performed damn well in all the tournaments that we've been casting as of late. Actually, even to my surprise, like I like the deck. I think it's amazing. And when you get something like a Bright Steel formation down late game, it's almost near impossible to beat the deck. So yeah, I mean, maybe this was just the safer option for this tournament.
Yeah, the other thing is with Radiant Guardian and Aurelion Soul getting hit, that sort of takes the Targon Allegiance as well as Luxol off the table. So this does feel like sort of the last Demacia deck in the format. And I mean, you can always leave Demacia out of the lineup, but it looks like players have just decided either to commit the Targon elsewhere, cut it from the lineup entirely, which I think is what most of these players have done, and just, stick for this board-centric Bannerman-esque deck that we've seen. The River Shaper buff from a couple patches ago still playing in really big here.
Yeah, speaking of that River Shaper buff, this was huge on the side of Joan being able to gold card that River Shaper. I think that when this deck first started, becoming popular, I don't think people really respected River Shaper much. And the thing is, though, if you get River Shaper to stick around for a few turns, this deck just goes off because if it's able to also have card advantage over you, there's almost no way to win because they're going to win board, they're going to win on card advantage, and they're just going to end up winning the game because of it. So when you're able to get rid of River Shaper that early, I think it gives you much more of a fighting chance. So I like that from Joan. Good to see that they're prioritizing removing that River Shaper.
Okay, so now we're going to see Joan. This is sort of the last big push that Joan gets to make, and this is why the Jack the Winner not coming out in any copies here in this Twisted Fate Swain deck after that nerf is a little concerning to me. This is generally where the TF Swain will start to struggle. You've got a couple of turns until turn 8. Your opponent can really start to swing the board back in this point, and I mean, with Joan in hand, or with Genevieve in hand, rather, we're going to see potentially 3 units picked off of Joan's board. And I mean, there's not really a phenomenal follow-up that you could have. You could throw down a Swain, but with a Concerted Strike in your opponent's hand, it's not going to get a lot done. And even the damage that was pushed through is going to get negated by this Spirit's Refuge on top of the Concerted Strike that was just picked up by Molotov.
Yeah, so we'll see. Concerted Strike still an absolutely amazing card. We'll see how Molotov decides to utilize it. Looks like we're going with the Genevieve first, which unfortunately puts Molotov outside of the range of really using anything in his hand, which stinks, especially having the attack token, not going to be able to use any of those combat tricks, and more importantly, deny for anything that will be impactful on the side of Joan. But we have 2 Challenger units, one with Scout. This is going to get through most of Joan's board here. I'm trying to think of a way that Joan could possibly remove something like the Genevieve. I don't know. Maybe a Noxian Guillotine, or make it rain into 1 Noxian Guillotine, but that still feels bad because that means one of these is going to live. And really, you don't want either one of these units sticking around for very long. So we'll see if we do have the Guillotine follow-up or possibly Noxian Fervor.
Yeah, I mean, on only 3 mana, there's nothing that Molotov's going to have here. Single combat would be sort of the one thing you might be scared about if you go for a Noxian Fervor. So if we do see it, I think there's a non-zero chance that you throw it down onto this. No, that wouldn't even matter. Yeah, I think Noxian Fervor is just a little bit too risky into the single combat.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's the thing too. Molotov, and not sure if he actually decided to do this for that reason. Okay, there's the guillotine. But not having any spells to play on 3 mana, your opponent does still have to play around certain things, and that's for anybody that's new to the game, any new players, that's definitely something that you need to take into consideration. You can go below the amount of mana that you need to play things in your hand if your opponent is knowingly playing around other cards. In this case, single combat. We do see the guillotine come out to prioritize the Genevieve, which, man, that's tough. Like you have to pick between a Genevieve and the dragon. Like which? That's really hard. I mean, you don't want either to live.
I actually think that I would have preferred to kill the dragon just because I have so many weak units on board. Anytime this dragon kills one of my 1/1s, it didn't take any damage necessarily. Yeah. The Genevieve, because she was already damaged, isn't getting a whole lot of value out of the continuous scout attacks. And this dragon is a little bit more likely to run away with the game. I don't think either decision was necessarily wrong. Because the Genevieve was attacking Twisted Fate, you would have lost 2 units on that turn anyway. So just prioritizing that, and now it looks like we do have the Petty Officer, but I mean, so what Molotov can do here on this 10 mana is Spirit's Refuge, block, and Concerted Strike, get a, 11 health swing back in his favor. And I don't think there's anything Joan could have to stop all of that outside of very specifically Noxian Fervor and Make It Rain.
Yeah, and wow. All right, so Joan going for a pretty big attack here. And we do have the Spirit's Refuge, right? So Molotov definitely not concerned about his life total right now, which Spirit's Refuge, so good in so many different spots. Good to see it in this deck. Obviously, Barrier works very well with Fiora, really any card in the deck. And it allows it to stick around through exactly what's happening now with Joan trying to be the aggressor, trying to whittle down the Nexus Elf of Molotov as quickly as possible. This is going to put a kink in the plan. And on top of that, this bad boy, it's got Fury. It's going to be +1/+1 after this turn. This is a pretty big swing, I think, for Molotov going into the next turn, but going to need probably another follower.
Oh, I'm a little surprised not to see the Concerted Strike come out here. Going down to 2 is a little bit spooky, and I don't think that Joan could have lethaled you in response. And as I had mentioned, they would need something to both pop the barrier and then still deal 3 damage to the Screeching Dragon, as there is only 1 Guillotine in Joan's deck. So I think I would have liked to see them go for that. Now 2 is a really scary place to be. Anytime your opponent gets down a Leviathan, it's just lethal from here on out.
Yeah, on top of that, you have the Noxian Fervor is just game, especially when that was kind of your last source of life gain. So you're stuck at 2 until you draw something. And that means that's multiple turns that Joan is going to have a chance to draw Leviathan, like you mentioned, or Noxian Fervor, or even a Make It Rain to face with a keg. I mean, there's a lot of different outs Joan has to win the game. But maybe Molotov just thinking, listen, I can't really play around that. I'm a little bit behind on field right now. I need to just worry about trying to kill anything that Joan plays, and we go from there. We do have the Deny kind of as a fallback plan as well, which is nice. So maybe Molotov is just kind of relying on that to win the game at this point, or at least keep him in the game.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see if he does get burned out here and get punished for floating that 6 mana rather when he had that Concerted Strike available, as well as taking sort of a weaker block going for the 2/2 rather than the 2/3, really respecting the possibility that Joan had something to pop the barrier. But I feel like even if Joan did, you just throw the Concerted Strike onto a different unit, you sacrifice your dragon, you still gain 11 HP, and you're sitting, at a pretty good life total. You still take 2 units off the board. I guess the concern was if a Leviathan did come down on turn 8, you didn't have a great answer for that. You do need the dragon to survive in conjunction with that riposte to really get that one done. So maybe Molotov just playing more for the unknown threat rather than what was immediately there.
So, I mean, the only argument I'm thinking you can kind of make is I guess you might want to save Concerted Strikes for the Fiora. You do get a lot of value trying to just, win the game. So that works too. And I think that's what Molotov's setting up for here. But you have 2 in hand, which means you do have to get 1 more attack through, which you do have the riposte for, so there is that. But, oh man, that just seems so risky to really go all in on that strategy, even with Joan having all of these smaller, dinky units on board. And right here we see, I mean, this is 1 more damage. This is so risky for Molotov to be at this next attempt right now.
I feel like this actually has to get the deny rather than the riposte, because if Joan has another burn spell or anything in hand and you use the riposte here, you are just dead. You're tapping yourself out of that mana. You have to understand that you're never beating Noxian Fervor in this situation, but you do still have the opportunity to play around things like Make It Rain and Death's Hand. Instead, gonna go for the barrier spell, and we'll see if Joan can find that one last little piece of damage.
That's rough too, because if Molotov is going for that Fiora strategy, now you don't have the riposte for that one attack that you do need to get through. You need that one attack plus the concerted strike. So really rough spot. We do have another dragon to go ahead and hit the field, but I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be enough. Joan there's so many outs, right? We have Make It Rain as a 3 of, Death's Hand as a 3 of, 2 Fervors. We haven't seen any of those, I don't believe. We also have 3 Salvage to dig. So, and then like you said, we also have Riptide Rex, Leviathan, and then Zap Straight Print. There's so many outs. I don't think there's any way. Joan has to get really unlucky to not draw something that wins in the game.
Yeah, and as you had mentioned with the riposte off the table, you suddenly take that Fiora Wincon off the table, and you still got 20 life on the side of Joan that you have to chew through. That Fiora is not winning you the game unless you can pick up another barrier effect, because, I mean, nothing else is going to do it. There's no attack reduction. This isn't a Freljord deck. You really need a barrier to get that online, but you still have to get through your opponent's field, and now you're in a situation where you have to use one of these concerted strikes on really something a little dinky that you don't want to.
Yeah, that's the thing about being at 1 health. Anything kills you. So you can't let anything get through. And now, too, because we don't have the repost, like it would have been nice to have the repost plus a concerted strike this turn even, just to,
hold on. So if Molotov blocks the Spiderling with the Fiora and then uses the concerted strike to kill the petty officer with the Fiora, she'll level up mid-combat.
And still be able to kill the Spiderling.
Yep. And Molotov could win the game this turn with the second concerted strike.
But
instead, so going to rearrange it onto the Flutterfly and go ahead and do the same play.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Still in this one in terms of actually getting the Fiora Wincon online. We did miss that a little bit earlier. Had to wait until combat lined up for our boomer eyes to go ahead and catch that one.
Wait, did you just lump yourself in as a boomer?
I didn't say that. You can't prove it.
Dude, I record these and put them on YouTube. I don't know what you're talking about.
So this is actually a little unfortunate for Molotov. Cannot immediately win the game with the Fiora because this Screeching Dragon will just kill this.
Yeah, wait, what? Yeah, no. Okay, I think so. Playing it and hovering. Wait, what? All right, but okay, it has to because of the Leviathan effect. Okay, yeah, that's really unfortunate. But on the bright side, you have the attack token going into a turn where you can just attack with this 9/3 right here, which is that's a big pickup.
And you have to use this right here, right? Or do you try to save this for the Fiora Wincon?
No.
Which now with both concerted gons, I feel like the Fiora Wincon's back off the table.
Yeah, you don't even care. At this point, you have such big units. Like, you're going to have another dragon come down. This is, you have game. Molotov has this.
Unless, I mean, it's not out of the question if, another Leviathan comes down for Joan, Molotov has no answers. Or if he can stun out enough of Molotov's board to get through an attack with the Swain. I don't think that one's going to be happening without the Leviathan, though. So we will have to see what actually does end up sort of finishing this one off for either of these players.
Wow, that Spirit's Refuge was huge. So really working out how Molotov has decided to play this here. We'll see if... All right, this is tough. All right, yeah, I was just going to say, do you just let this through? And yeah, it looks like Molotov opting to do that. I don't know, because now that you have Swain, if Joan plays a Leviathan, like you mentioned, you might actually have needed that Fiora Wincon. That is not a top deck that you want right now, though, for Molotov. That is terrible.
Demacia and top decking 1-drops on turn 10. Name a more iconic duo SJW. I cannot think of one myself.
Nope, absolutely not. It's if it was a Cytheria, it's probably, well, technically Cytheria is better, but you know what? As far as I'm concerned, that's the worst possible draw you can get with a Demacia deck. We do see the
especially when you're staring down this fearsome Swain.
Yeah.
I mean, this does mean that if this big dragon dies, if that is something like another Ravenous Flock in Joan's hand, then if they can draw something to stun out the dragon, this Swain is actually just going to be lethal, exactly lethal even with this elusive attacker. But I don't know what this last card in Joan's hand is. It feels like they've been holding it forever, but it's another Ravenous Flock. And if he can top deck something to stun the dragon and Molotov top decks either another weak unit or a barrier spell, this could just be lethal.
Wow, yeah, so going in for the attack, going to get some damage onto this Swain, but overall, that trade works out a lot better for Joan. Ooh, okay. That's not a bad top deck. This barrier is likely going to go onto the dragon here. Okay, never mind.
Oh, yeah,
Never
that
mind.
is... What an insane
Wow.
top deck for Joan, though. I mean... That's the best thing in your deck, right? Is just getting that Leviathan off the top.
We've got over this. Like, that's why you play this deck. Is that card? That's a champion. That's not a follower. That's a champion. It's called Leviathan.
So many follower champions in this game. I'm even calling Riptide Rex a follower champion in terms of build water. Not mine, of course, but when we watch them in tournaments.
Yours always fails on the RNG, right?
Yeah, I've got a folder of screenshots at this point. Just Rex being a bad boy.
It's right next to the Make It Rain fails, right?
I actually put one on Twitter this morning where I've been playing a lot of Deep, and every single time I tried to do that cheeky, oh, I passed my turn 3, you play Wording Stones, I play Jaw Hunters, my opponent has always had an answer. Either the Vile Feaster. I finally go against, Ramp Soul, and I'm like, oh, there's no Vile Feast coming out of this deck, and he Flash Freeze.
Yeah, wow, that feels bad. Like, Make It Rain is why Jaw Hunters is, like, balanced. So...
Okay, but we get the Concerted Strike off the top for Molotov, so now with this Dragon being up to 5 attack thanks to the Swain kill, actually does have an answer for the Leviathan at this point, and Joan not having the Swain on board does mean these units can block for now, but you are going to take that little bit of damage from the Zap Spray Fin.
Man, this back and forth Boulevard is insane. Like, this is one of the things I love about Runeterra is I feel like we see a lot of games where we're like, all right, Molotov's going to win. Oh, wait, no. Joan just had a sick top deck. Joan's going to win. And I feel like that's exactly what's happened here over the last few turns. It's gone back and forth to where both players get the perfect draw, and it's still anyone's game at this point.
Whatever that card in Joan's hand is, though, wasn't played pre-combat. If it's a spell like a Noxian Fervor or a Death's Hand, Noxian Fervor would be lethal on the face. Oh, Salvage could get either one of these. I mean, if you can find a 2-damage spell to kill either of these units, the Leviathan will survive and immediately end the game with the Overwhelm. He's found something, and it's the Death's Hand onto the Dragon.
I'm going to win it.
That is going to be Joan picking that one up 2-1, and you just cannot stop this boat, man. It's too big. Even 3 Concerted Strikes wasn't enough for the Shen Fiora deck to get it done.
So that was a heck of a lot of back and forth there. Pretty cool stuff to see going to 3 games. So awesome. Pretty typical decks that we're used to seeing, though. So again, one thing I'm going to keep my eye on is if we're able to nab any Elise Sin games coming up soon here. All right, and that's going to do it. Joan taking it away there from Molotov. Pretty cool games. Most of the decks that we saw for this week 3 day 1 action for LRA were pretty typical standard decks as far as, what we're expecting in the metagame right now with TF, Swain, Endure, stuff like that. So going to be interesting to see if we see any kind of weird, maybe Lee Sin pop up, stuff like that. So, but as always, everybody stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you, and peace out.